The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're very pleased to have two members of the House of Delegates with us today. Delegate Brenda Pogge, good to see you.
Good to see you, Woody. Thanks for having me.
Delegate Monty Mason, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody. Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your district and how it has fared over the last few years in terms of the economy.
Sure. Well, I represent the 93rd District, which is the city of Williamsburg, part of James City and York County, and northern parts of the city of Newport News. And we've done fairly well. We have our challenges with the tourism industry. That's a big part of the upper part of my district, and have been working towards trying to drive that market. But then at the same time, while not turning our back on the backbone of our economy, we're working towards diversification of it, because Fort Eustis is in the lower part of my district, and we've also recently had a listening tour there to discuss whether or not they would draw down the number of troops at Fort Eustis. So we've been working on a lot of things that try to utilize the work that's being done inside of the gates and to partner with private enterprise and companies outside of the gates. Part of that diversification, that we can utilize the technological skills and the things that exist in the district to try to develop 21st century businesses.
And Delegate Pogge, what about your district? I believe it's a little bit more rural than Delegate Mason's.
It is. My district abuts Delegate Mason's district. I have the 96th House district, and basically it incorporates the upper portion of James City County and across to the upper portion of York County. It's much more rural in nature, and also I think demographically, age-wise, the folks in my district are a little bit older, a lot of retirees in my district, and a lot of retired military. And so we've fared pretty well economically, I'd say, although we are seeing higher incidence of homelessness with people in my district, so that's a little bit of a concern. But of course, tourism, as Delegate Mason mentioned, is a big concern, and the effects that the tourism numbers have dropped a little bit, and so there's big concern about that in the district because tourism is a big part of both of our districts.
What about the impact of budget cuts by way of the Department of Defense and sequestration in general?
I think that's a big concern for both of us because I have Camp Perry in my district, and he's got military in his district as well. And of course, as I said, the retirees and contract workers that are in both of our districts. So we're always worried about sequestration. I understand the President has mentioned doing away with the sequestration, and we're all hoping that that'll be something that's followed through by Congress.
And what about your committee assignments? I believe you're on education, finance, and health, welfare, and institutions.
Yes, I am. Great committee assignments. I love health, welfare, and institutions, finance. I love them all. I love education. And a lot of issues that we're going through right now, especially in education, dealing with education reforms, SOL reforms. Of course, the budget is always a huge factor dealing with education because it's something that we are loath to cut every year, whether it's higher education or K-5 through 12. So those issues are going through right now, although budgetarily in Virginia this year, I think there's some very good news that we have higher than estimated revenues, and those new revenues that we're projecting are going to be addressed and probably will manifest themselves somewhere in the education budget.
Great. And Delegate Mason, your committee assignments.
Mine have been very good. As a freshman, I was very pleased to get put on the Courts of Justice Committee. I serve on the criminal subcommittee, the constitutional law subcommittee, and the judicial appointment subcommittee.
That must be interesting because you're not a lawyer, right?
It's fascinating. It was a great stroke of luck for me, but it's kind of like being thrown in the deep end of the pool with a cinder block because you better be ready to not just tread water but swim. So I have to do a lot of digging and a lot of work because when they talk about code sections and they practice law every day, I have to look at the code section, get a grasp of what we're talking about, and then move forward. But it's put me in the heart of so much. I think we did 28% of the bills throughout the legislature last year. So I'm right in the middle of so many of the topical issues of the day. It's really been helpful for me, and I love it in a sick kind of way. I also got put on county, cities, and towns, which is great for our localities. You know, a lot of the things we do up here, we unfortunately put a burden on the localities. Having been involved in the Economic Development Authority and a lot of the work with the city of Williamsburg, I am able to try to watch for those things. So I'm fortunate there. You know, Brenda talked about her role on education. And, you know, that was something that's is something extremely important to me. I'm the father of a first grader next year. I'll have a kindergartner going into our elementary school. But it was a quick lesson for me because early childhood education and K through 12 and higher education with William and Mary right in the heart of my district, incredibly important to me. But when you're not on those committees, you have to work extra hard to stay up on what's happening, to be involved in it, and make sure you watch out. But our delegation with Senator Norman, Senator Miller, and Delegate Pogge really have a strong basis up here on education, and I try very hard to stay in tune to those issues as well.
Talk to us a little bit more about the educational issues that are working their way through the General Assembly. You mentioned the standards of learning. I know that there are reforms being debated yet this year. Talk to us about the importance of those discussions.
There are some reforms in the area of accreditation that we're working on, and we've been working on those for a couple years now, and some of the things that we've tried has not been as popular. So what we're doing now is going back to those and looking at how we can help the schools that are failing and boost them up and get them on the right track for accreditation, and pare back some of the burdensome things that we've put on them so that they can move toward accreditation by having different levels that they must achieve. When you go on their website, you can see that they are progressing, even though they may not have achieved accreditation yet. We are, just today, we passed through for the second time a bill that would allow these different levels to be put on so that they can show that progress as they are working, because they're working so hard to achieve accreditation, and we want them to get all the credit that's due to them. So that's a big one that we've been working on, and there's been some things that we've been working on in education that's very conducive to homeschooling, because we're finding statistically that homeschoolers do as well or better than public school kids, and we want to make sure that the state of Virginia stays friendly toward homeschooling, because what it's all about in the end is readying our children with a world-class education to succeed once they graduate.
Yeah, and I believe that's one reason, another reason why you support the Tim Tebow bill, for example.
That's right.
Talk to us about that and the meaning of it.
Well, I'm a former homeschooler. I have 5 kids. Each child spent 2 years at home with mom, and so having raised 4 boys out of the 5, they all played soccer. It was important, I thought, to me, to ensure that homeschool children are able to access public schools and be able to join in and participate. They do on the community leagues with their friends, and once they hit school, they could no longer participate. So I think it's only fair that their parents are paying their property taxes, are contributing to the public schools, that public schools open up and allow them, at least in some capacity, to compete, but not have a special slot or rubber stamp to get in, but to compete with their peers for a slot on the team. So it has passed the House again. I don't believe it's ever passed the Senate yet, and we may be in for another disappointment this year, but it's something that I think we're all beginning to understand and want to be able to facilitate all children across the board with a level, excuse upon playing field.
And of course, there are other issues in education. I know the continued funding of K through 12 at levels which reflect 2009 numbers is something that the General Assembly has agreed to do. We also have that A to F criteria that apparently is dead now, as I understand it. And then there was a piece of legislation that would have allowed the state to take over failing schools. That was struck down, I believe, by a court. But those are still issues that are very important, I take it.
They are, and they all grapple with things that we want to solve and the challenges that we face. I mean, we've had schools that have not achieved the level that we're looking for a number of years. Brenda just mentioned a great step, saying, okay, you may not have been fully accredited, but you're making progress and you're making strides. A through F I always thought was an extremely simplistic solution to a complex problem. Hopefully that is now gone, but part of that legislation is trying to come up with some sort of likely more complex but grading structure to, you never got one grade in school, right? You got an English grade, a math grade, a science grade, so hopefully we'll look at it a little more in depth. We also, you mentioned 2009 level, so holding it harmless is holding it harmless at a level that has not been raised in a long time. I was disappointed to see in the House budget, we had tried to get in the early childhood preschool initiative. We had tried to get it such that if monies were not used by a particular school district, they could be transferred to others. We saw with the budget that was just released this weekend that that money was recaptured. And I think it was about $3.6 million that goes back into the budget rather than to other localities. And we want to do everything we can. Talk about level playing field. I mean, my daughters were fortunate enough that I could afford preschool and pay for them to go. So when they got to kindergarten, they were ready to play. They knew their alphabet. They could, count to daddy's age, all those good things. And you come into a class where maybe 50% of the students aren't ready and aren't in that situation. I believe that we need to give every child, regardless of means, the opportunity to be ready to go when they hit kindergarten.
Now, there's a pretty tough indicator at the third grade level. If kids can't read at the third grade level, that's a predictor that's, that causes the state, for example, to consider building more correctional facilities. So there's a real need to ensure that those kids get the help they need.
You're right. And I'm a big proponent of phonics early for children. My children also had the luxury of going to a private school, and it was a program that weighed heavily on phonics, and they were all good readers, and their comprehension was excellent. They were voracious readers, and that is so important. And one thing we are looking at is in the private sector, there is a group, the Literacy Lab, that is being utilized in Northern Virginia right now to come alongside those schools that are underperforming. Because just as you said, what we're noticing is reading and comprehension is the areas that are missing, and to boost their reading skills and get them to enjoy reading makes a difference all along the rest of their school career, and does go with them into the real world when they go back. And demographically, people in prison, there's a very high percentage that cannot read, are functionally illiterate. And so we're seeing that it's so important that reading skills be promoted, and that they achieve certain reading skills. And that would be a big boost in bringing accreditation levels up.
So it confirms the old adage, you learn to read and then you read to learn.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about the community colleges and the universities in your district and how they are doing.
In my district, I do have a community college, and I think, in my opinion, it is on the cutting edge of Virginia community colleges. It is Thomas Nelson, and I have the historic Triangle location in my district. And workforce development is something that is really being promoted there. The state is behind it financially. I think we have the test program there, where we're working with the private sector in training people who may not want to go on to be doctors and lawyers, but who also want to earn a good living in skills. And so Thomas Nelson is working very hard on workforce development, and also bringing in a lot of programs, dentistry, LPN, those type of things into play. So very proud of the historic Triangle campus, and it's state-of-the-art and probably one of the newest constructed community colleges in the state. Monty has the university of record in our area.
Talk to us about the university and how it's doing.
Well, I'm a graduate of the College of William & Mary, I'm proud to say, and it is an outstanding facility. Everybody has their funding challenges, right? And we worked with the state in the last few years to come up with the William & Mary Promise, which guarantees that when you come in as a freshman, you know what you're going to pay for the 4 years as far as tuition. Also gave us some flexibility as far as tuition rates. The General Assembly and still watches very closely. And unfortunately, William & Mary was one of the 3 campuses not to get the faculty raise this time. So that's unfortunate. But it does give us more flexibility to be a world-class institution. And it's a nice mix because the community college system that is so strong in our area, we have the program, the community college students can go and get into a state school.
2+2. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And they're showing that they perform at a level or better than the students that go there for the 4 years. Mm-hmm. But that workforce development program is really critical. When one of the governor's big announcements was Continental down in Newport News, $40 million development, 500 new jobs. The executive that came in said, I know you're excited about the jobs, but I'm concerned about filling them. Mm-hmm. So the ability to work with our community colleges and our private sector employees and say, what do you need? And matching the 2 programs up so that you can get qualified employees on the spot. The link to our veterans, particularly with Fort Eustis, with Langley, with Camp Perry, there in our area, also is another great opportunity that we've been working with the V3 program and the Virginia Transition Assistance Program.
And of course, those community colleges play a great role in our returning veterans, their ability, for example, to get credit for experience that they've gained abroad. Talk to us about how important that is.
Well, that's a bill that we just looked at this year, was giving college credit to veterans for the skills that they've learned in their training in the military. And so should that pass out, and I'm sure it will, and be signed by the governor, that veterans now will be able to be assessed and get credit and bring the training that they had to college with them and get credit for that, which is going to be a huge boost. Not only will it save them tuition money and the government, because a lot of them utilize their GI Bill, but it also give them a boost up so that they're not coming out of the military and starting from scratch in education, but they'll be able to utilize the training that they've had. It's important to me as well. I have 2 sons in the military, one in the Air Force and one in the Navy. So both of them have been to college, but in their shoes I can see what a great program this is, and it's a great way for us to recognize the veterans for their service and what they have accomplished.
And I believe this year's budget also includes funding for a couple of new veteran service centers,
Yes.
one in Northern Virginia, one in the Hampton Roads area. How important is that?
That's huge. That is huge, especially because of the backups at the VA, that now we have veteran service centers that are easily accessed, especially by people in a large military community, which we do have in Hampton Roads and Virginia Beach side, and also on this side. We have a lot of retirees, a lot of people coming back to the military bases and then settling in and around them. So by having these 2 military service centers, we'll take a lot of burden off the VA, which is already stretched to its limits, and give them a place to get services started and to come in and get counseling and get pointed in the right direction to what services are available to them.
Back to tourism in your district, you mentioned it earlier, and I know you have some legislation addressing that. Talk to us about what that means.
Well, so the governor had included in the budget just a small start, $500,000 for the Virginia Tourism Growth Incentive Fund. And what this is designed to do is, for the first time at the state level, promote product development in the tourist industry. So in our area, we're always talking about improving or getting new product or improving the product. Busch Gardens did Christmas Town. Their numbers really boomed. Colonial Williamsburg does the Revolutionary Experience. So they're really doing new things to try to attract and draw new people. This was just a small step to start that might be rather than for our area so much, where we're looking for big product development, it was really targeted towards more rural areas. I'm originally from Farmville, Virginia. So you have Greenfront Furniture there, and you have the High Bridge Trail. This might have been seed money for somebody to start a canoeing company down the Appomattox River. You know, so it's seed money to accentuate what you have in your community, urban or rural, big tourist or smaller town, and trying to develop businesses and give leg up opportunities to places, to people in those areas.
Now how important is farming and forestry in your district and to the Commonwealth at large?
Well, agriculture is the biggest employer and the biggest business in the state of Virginia. And
Repeat that. I don't think many people know that.
People do not realize that, but agriculture is Virginia's largest industry. And I am very, very supportive of every effort that we can make to keep agriculture alive and well in Virginia, and to encourage agritourism, which is something that I hope that the governor's incentives will help as well, because we want to get people to go out into the highways and byways of Virginia and experience Virginia and to be able to stop at farms and allow farms, and this is relatively new with last year's legislation, that farmers will be able to sell right from their farms what they're growing and in the near future maybe what they're raising. People want choices. They want choices in what they eat and what they can buy, and it's very much a trend across the nation for more natural foods and going back to the source of where the foods are coming from. So agritourism, I think, is going to be big business in Virginia because agriculture is our largest industry, and that's one of my House bills, House Bill 1488. It was a bill that really will facilitate people who have farms that also are enjoying an easement, a conservation easement on their farms. And basically, there's been some trouble about what they can do on their farms. And these are, working farms. And so what that bill will do is if there's a dispute between the holder of the conservation easement and the farmer or the owner of the property, that we've set up a place where those disputes can be mitigated outside of court. So it was a great bill and has bipartisan support, and the governor has pledged to sign it. It was a first because there was no authority over the conservation holders except for the IRS. And so now Virginia has set up a system that will help the farmer and stay out of court and help the conservation holders so they'll know what their duties are.
Great. Transportation, it's still on the table. There's a lot of funding available as a result of a bill a couple of years ago. But what are some of the needs in your district in terms of transportation?
So nothing's more important than the widening of 64 all the way to Richmond. And we know that's a lot of work. We got a long way to go. We are slotted for the widening through the Fort Eustis interchange and fixing that interchange, and then to lower 199. That's in the till. Unfortunately, we need to see through the next step, that is from the lower portion of 199, southern or eastern, what have you, to northern. Because if we don't get that done, we have to cross some creeks. So we got some Camp Perry is right there. We've got to see that through, because if not, if 4 lanes comes down to 2 right there at 199, it's going to be a parking lot on 199, people trying to go that way. So that's a critical next step for us in our area that we're all working together to make sure we see through. Transit is one. The big transportation bill did a great job of roads and what we think of transportation. But transit is just enormous in my area. And we've been working hard to do what we can to raise the awareness of what a big economic engine it is for our employees, for our employers, and just make it more efficient. I carried a $1.9 million transit study for high-capacity bus rapid transit on the peninsula. Peninsula is very linear. We think it would set up and work very well. It wasn't included in the House, but was in the Senate, so we're hopeful there because, Busch Gardens wants people to be able to jump on the bus and come and come right to their gate and go. As well as the shipyard doesn't want to use land to build more parking lots. So if you could get on from lower James City County and efficiently shoot to the shipyard, or from Thomas Nelson down in Hampton and efficiently shoot back up to Busch Gardens to go to work, You know, if you can shave 10 or 15 minutes, we rode the bus with a local reporter. One lady rode the bus an hour and a half to go 8 miles to get to work.
Wow.
So she works a 9-hour day and really gets paid for 6 because she gets there 30 minutes early because of the bus line. She rides it for an hour and a half. She has to get up an hour early. So it's like she commutes from Richmond to Newport News every day, going 7 miles on a bus.
So obviously transportation is a critical issue in your district as well.
It is, because my district will probably be the recipient of the parking lot once we create it. And already, right now, in the summertime, and I live in the northern part of the district, 64 becomes a parking lot right up there. I'm in Norge, so even from Norge north, the traffic getting to 295 is really what is causing a lot of congestion for us. And so we would really love to see, and what really needs to be, is 64 taken all the way up to 295, and that at that juncture, then, you know, going down 2 lanes, because then traffic is splitting off, and most of the traffic is headed to 95 or to 85, especially the truck traffic.
Well, another key component is getting that 3rd train to Newport News, being able to jump. I have people from my company say, hey, I'm flying into D.C., how can I hop the train down to Williamsburg? Not so easily.
No,
and
not
so
so easy.
we just building roads isn't going to solve our transportation problem. We have to look at our other alternatives and try to make sure we get that 3rd passenger train all the way to Newport News.
We've got about 2 minutes left. One of the issues still pending before the General Assembly is a result of the unfortunate circumstances that our former governor found himself in. Relates to ethics reform. There's this perception, whether it's real or imagined, that there's something needs to be done in terms of state government and ethics reform. I know there are a lot of proposals floating around. Where do you see things coming out this session?
I think that we will see a major piece of legislation. It is bipartisan in nature. It will, I believe it will come out and hopefully be signed by the governor. Both of the houses of the General Assembly are in agreement and have similar packages. So I think we'll see that it greatly puts more restrictions and goes a lot farther than the package that was voted out last year. And I think it puts the gift caps across the board at $100, which is what the governor has recommended. And it also takes out of the mix travel and intangible, tangible gifts. There is no difference now. It's $100. And I think that'll be some good reforms, and we may come back and go even farther if it appears that this package and what we're proposing in this package isn't enough. We may come back and go at it some more, but I think most people are pretty comfortable in that they can trust the representatives that they were elected. We wouldn't be elected if we weren't able to be trusted, and I think that there have been very, very few violations in the history of the House of Delegates or the Senate.
Well, thank you for being here, Delegate Monty Mason, Delegate Brenda Pogge. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.